Hey, everybody, welcome back here to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. My name is Sean Rhodes, and I'm the Chief Sales Sergeant here at Bulletproof Selling. And at this brand, at this company, at this mission, we believe that hope is not a sales strategy. So we're here each and every week to increase the performance of salespeople, the results they see out of their pipelines, and the sales that their teams are able to make. Now, this selling series, we get to interview the top people in the field of sales, chief revenue officers for some of the largest companies on the planet, salespeople that are out there actually managing salespeople in the front lines, and of course, authors, speakers, consultants, the folks that are out there helping folks train to get better at this wonderful career of sales. Now, each one of these interviews gets to actually produce a sales system. We've had more than, I think, 4 dozen of them built so far this year. So me and the person that I bring on this show, we're going to dig into the stuff that's important to them in their world, that's important to you in your world in the field of sales. And we're going to build a sales system that you can use no matter the size of your business or the size of your goals. Now, if you haven't noticed through Bulletproof Selling Run this year, we've gotten to interview a lot of folks in the world of franchise. Now, the reason I love these folks is because you think about a franchise like a McDonald's or a franchise gym or a bake shop. I mean, there's hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of different franchise models out there. They all rely on systems because the people that onboard with those franchises, those franchisees, they've never maybe run a gym before. They've never sold a widget or whatever that franchise does. So they have to take those systems, they have to be able to rapidly implement them and sell. And so if you're wondering for yourself as a salespeople, maybe you're not in the world of franchise, what are you going to get out of listening to somebody that's an expert in the field of franchise sales? Well, systems. Think about systems. And that's why it is absolutely my privilege, to welcome on the show today, Mr. Red Boswell with IFPG. And that's the International Franchise Professional Group. I believe that's right. But Red is going to correct me, I'm sure. Buddy, Red, welcome to the show.
Awesome, Sean. Thanks. Couldn't be happier to be here.
And now, did I get that right? International Franchise Professional Group? Okay.
Nailed it.
That's the one. All right. Now, it's an association unlike most other associations. So tell us a little bit about this organization that you lead and the salespeople that you have underneath you.
Thanks, Sean. Excited to be here again. Appreciate it. IFPG is the world's most trusted franchise consulting group. The industry, franchising, calls us brokers. We prefer advisor, coach, matchmaker, certainly consultant. You might even call us an agent. So if you know the realtor model, realtors are out there finding folks interested in buying a house and then matching them with that ideal house. The seller of that house then pays a nice commission upon closing. Same thing with us. I mean, a house is a huge life decision. Buying a franchise is even a bigger decision. Why would you not work with a world-class expert that can match you with that ideal franchise, or perhaps ideal franchises to meet your budget, your geographic preferences, your lifestyle goals, all the things you want to accomplish, and so many times have no clue where to start and certainly nowhere to end with the right franchise. So that's what I've got, about 640 consultants out there around the globe, mostly North America, helping people find the ideal franchise, and we have a blast doing it.
And those hundreds of consultants, are they mostly dealing with folks that are reaching out to them, to your organization, saying, have been thinking about this franchise model, or are your consultants responsible for developing interest in the prospects they're pursuing?
Mostly the latter, Sean. There is. It's a fascinating time to be in franchise consulting because it's it's been around for 40 years, and yet so few people even know we exist. So my consultants are really out there finding interested parties or generating interest in the first place. If you might, look at the last few years, how many executives have been laid off? What did I read the other day? The Great Resignation. Folks realized they're done with it. Give me some freedom. I'm digging this work from home thing. I think I might work from the lake or the beach. And so their job's not letting them do that oftentimes, and they're looking for alternatives. My consultants are there to help them find those best alternatives.
And I imagine a lot of challenge that people have in the field of sales when you're reaching out to people that may not know about the product or service that you have. And you're in a really unique field because your consultants rep, I imagine, hundreds, if not thousands, of different types of franchises. Everything from you got to show up to work every day to this could be done completely remotely to a hybrid version of the two. It's the whole mix when it comes to franchises, I know. So how do your folks tend to get around this barrier that a lot of people have, where if I'm reaching out to somebody, they might not even know that they need what I've got to offer. What do your consultants do before the call or during the call to kind of spark that interest, to let them know, here, I'm not just here to take your time. I'm here to help you get that next step in your career, next step in your life.
Boy, that is a big question, Sean. Hopefully the consultants have built a bit of a brand themselves, and you can research that consultant prior to the call. Some of them are buying leads. Let's be real. They're just simply, time is valuable. There are organizations out there. We have a sister company that is a lead provider for many of my consultants. And those consultants, rather than invest a lot of their time into cultivating relationships, which is part of any sales job, they're out there acquiring leads that are pre-qualified, a bit vetted, and interested in talking to a consultant. Boy, you get somebody like that, you get to go into the A team real fast and just start doing what you do best, building a relationship, that advisor, your trusted advisor role, and taking him through the matchmaking process with a lot of thorough, detailed questions of get to know you, and then start talking about specific brands and ultimately introducing them to the franchisor. The biggest fear, two fears that a lot of folks have: how am I going to get my leads? That's in any sales role. We've answered that problem pretty quickly. And then, how in the world am I going to be a master, an expert at 500 plus franchise opportunities? And fortunately, it's impossible. We're simply educating, matchmaking, hand-holding, guiding through the process to those ideal franchises. And then we let the franchisors do the process. And to your point, Sean, they have their organized franchise discovery process. They know what they're doing. It's organized. It's predetermined. They're taking candidates through that process, and we are just simply massaging it along the way, helping to make sure the consultant and the franchisor are working well together.
And for the salespeople that you manage, salespeople, no matter their industry, tend to be challenged by the same couple of things. So I'm always curious to get this answer out of every one of my guests. Where do you see your consultants, those hundreds of salespeople you manage, where do you see them rely on hope a little more than they should throughout their sales process?
Well, I'm a hope junkie, man. I love it.
The first one that's ever come on the show, a hope junkie. Okay, cool.
Hi, I'm Red Boswell, and I'm a hope junkie. It's in sales, you have to see that glass not only half full, but overflowing. There's so much opportunity. And to your, so much of the world views the word sales or salesperson in a negative light. It's that pushy, thought. In fact, I looked over as I was talking to you earlier, my coffee cup. Coffee is for closers. We all know Glenn Ross and the classic scene there. But truly, I loathe that mentality. If you got to be that hardcore closer, you're doing something wrong. Now, you always want to ask for the sell. But when it comes time to ask for the sell, it's sort of a no-brainer. It's the next logical step in the process, and you already know the answer. So being a coffee's for closer, we joke about it, but my people, I don't know that one of them I've ever heard refer to themselves as a salesperson or on their LinkedIn profile, full-time franchise salesperson. They really are, like most salespeople, advising, coaching, consulting, matchmaking, taking through the process step by step with a trust mentality. And when you do that, you're selling, and you're selling yourself, you're selling the opportunity, the lifestyle, and it works. You impact a lot of lives doing it.
So talk to us a little about that step-by-step process. Because if your folks are not relying on hope at all, they would be the very first organization I've run across in a couple of decades of studying this. Because even the top salespeople in the world, if I ask them to map out their sales process today and tomorrow, it's going to look slightly different because very few people take the time to systemize this stuff. But you being in the world of franchise, my guess is you've done more work than the average bear in this area. So talk to us a little bit about that sales process that you have your people walk through, broad strokes of how they take somebody from a lead that has never talked to them before to somebody that they can get them a little bit interested in the idea of owning a business now, to eventually getting in touch with those franchisors that can handle it the rest of the way to the sale.
Sure. There are some foundational steps, and then there's a lot of fluidity and flexibility throughout. So
Hmm.
the consultant will typically, the salesperson, the consultant that is matchmaking with that candidate will send them an email beforehand, typically. Hey, this is who I am. Let's connect on LinkedIn. So they send them a connection request. They might send them a pre-call educational video of here's the steps we're going to go through together, kind of setting the stage for what this relationship will look like. And then when they have that call, they've set it up on the calendar beforehand, almost always. And it may be 30 minutes to an hour. They're going kind of deep. Tell me about
Yeah.
yourself, asking a lot of questions, shutting up and listening, taking a lot of notes about them. Now, this is before the structured questions. This is just to get to know you, help you understand, is this a good fit? Or really, what are you wanting to accomplish?
Mm.
And from there, they can determine if it's wise and prudent to take the next step, which is let's go deeper. Maybe it's the next call. Maybe if we have some time now or you're in a big hurry to get a decision made, then we can do it on this call. Then they go deeper with the financials. Some of them will actually email some questionnaires to the candidate. We call our leads candidates at that point when we know they're interested. But ideally, you want to ask them live on the call. Maybe it's a Zoom call. And you can get so much more from their answers than just a yes or no. I laughed. I smiled. I laughed out loud, frankly, earlier when you were introducing me. And the first thing you mentioned after franchise was McDonald's. So many
Yeah.
people think, McDonald's
Sure.
franchise. What other, you're telling me there are franchises that aren't restaurants?
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, only 3,000.
Yeah.
And so, I use the same analogy. So you did well by mentioning a restaurant, and then I bet we have 10 different painting franchises. I mean, there are
Right.
so many. We have pooper scooper franchises. We have, you name it. There's something out there for everyone, from $20,000 all in to 5 million plus all in.
Hmm.
And then everything in between, passive, semi-passive, full-time, job replacement, lots of variety. So our consultants start educating that candidate quickly once they learn what they about them, and then start the matchmaking process. It may be 2 or 3 calls. It may be 5 or 7 calls,
Hmm.
conversations before they ultimate introduce them and do what I would call take a back seat. You've been leading this charge. You've been taking them through the process. It's time for you to get out of that car, get in the back seat, and listen and massage their relationships, the multiple franchisors' relationships with your candidate, single or couple. And it works well that way.
And what are some of the things that happen when your consultants don't follow the process that you have mapped out? Because I know with 600 plus of them, there's a little bit of cat herding going on. Because I know in a team of 5, there's some cat herding going on. Get it that big, and you're going to have to, get some sheepdogs to just kind of keep everybody in the same corral. So talk to me about when somebody diverts from the process that you've set, that your team has set. What are some of the things that begin to happen? Do we see client attrition or prospect attrition? Do we see folks getting mismatched to the wrong product or service, the wrong franchise? What happens when folks begin to go off the reservation in that way?
Well, fortunately, I describe IFPG in a word, libertarian. So
Okay.
we're not political, but
Yeah.
we don't have Big Brother looking over your shoulder, cracking the whip,
Right.
smacking you when you mess up, because all 640 of my consultants are indeed independent business owners. They own their own practice, their own consulting
Mm.
firm. Now, where they're members with us, we guide them, we train them fully, we certify them, we can provide them leads, we provide them websites, CRM, everything they need to be super successful. Heck, we do over 200 free trainings a year for our consultants. But it's obvious real quick if they're not following the process, if they are skipping steps, if they are getting short with the candidates, and again, skipping steps is a big one, or perhaps even bigger. We know the world of sales, laziness,
Mm.
excuses. Oh, it's 2 p.m. I got to mow the yard. No, you don't. You hitting those phones, brother.
I love
Get after it.
it,
Numbers game. I mean,
man.
certainly you can improve this percentage on the numbers significantly through the training and through the steps that we teach them, but you still got to have the numbers.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So it's interesting you mentioned that there's a handoff process that your folks have to go through where they do take a back seat. And this is something that a lot of salespeople have built within their organizations. Maybe they're responsible for generating the first meeting, and then they hand that off to an account executive, or they generate that meeting. They are the account executive, but then they have to hand it off to service and delivery, or somebody to spec out that product or service, make sure it fits inside of the client's facility, whatever that might look like. Talk to me a little bit about where you've seen that done well and poorly in that handoff process. Because we're talking for you, consultant to franchisor, but I know this is going to apply to a lot of salespeople as well. So talk to me a little bit about where do the train wrecks tend to happen, and how do we keep those things on the tracks?
Absolutely. So I'll give you a little industry lingo. All right. We say the word franchisee so much throughout our world that I live in, and we say the word franchisor every other third sentence
Yeah.
practically. We shorten them to Z and Zor. So
Okay.
Zor is that parent company franchisor that is responsible for the organization. The Z is that local franchisee that owns a location or maybe 10 locations. And then the franchise is the actual location or the opportunity. So the mistakes happen in the franchise discovery process from our vantage point when a consultant is throwing mud on the wall. They are not truly doing the matchmaking, asking the questions, and matching them appropriately. Maybe they're chasing the commission. Maybe they've got 5 brands that they love. Guess what? We have over 500. You got 5 that you show everybody to. You are not working with integrity. You're not having your candidate's best interest at heart, and you are probably chasing the big commissions. Maybe you've got a best friend that sells for one of those brands. That's an embarrassment. We catch that and we call them out on it quickly.
Yeah.
We are not their boss, so we can't stop them from that as long as they're not lying, cheating, and stealing. But we want them to certainly follow the right procedures. They'll have a much happier clientele. They'll have a lot more referrals and stop so match appropriately. Now, on the flip side, we'll have some consultants that also skip the process, skip some of the steps, and they'll just register a candidate with umpteen Zors. And that candidate's not truly engaged with that Zor, loving it, wanting to know more. And the Zor does not appreciate it at all. It's sort of like crying wolf. Suddenly, those leads you send them are not treated with the same kid gloves that they might treat other consultants' leads because you have wasted their time.
I love that. And then you also mentioned something about making it the natural next step. And this is something that a lot of salespeople struggle with. There's a big hurdle to jump when I get past that relationship building phase. And finally, I have to ask you for the next step, for the call to action, whether that comes from, sign the proposal and we can get started next week, to would you like to take the next step in this sales process with us? How do you find your best salespeople manage that in a way that makes it feel natural for your Z's, for your customers?
Absolutely. So, we have some people are audible, some are visual.
Yeah.
We study the different personality types, but at the same time, you want to have systems that you can follow with each candidate. So whether it's a good consultant taking someone through the first third of the process, or a franchise development rep who's selling and qualifying that candidate for their opportunity, you want to begin with the end in mind. Talk about the timeline you're going to go through with them. Make sure they're on board with that same timeline. And then as you go through those steps, you can remind them that they told you they wanted to have a decision within X number of weeks or months, let's say 6 weeks. Now we are halfway through the process, but we're 5 weeks in. We are behind on our process. They already know that because each call you've lovingly and professionally shared with them that now you wanted to be to a decision point within 6 weeks, but we're only on step 2 of 10 and we're already 3 weeks in. So we need how about we have a call tomorrow and the next day to get back on track? Or if you need to readjust your timeline, Mr. and Mrs. Candidate, so you're acting in their best interest, you're reminding them what they wanted you to hold them accountable to, not being this pushy, annoying salesperson. You're being their coach, their tour guide, if you will. And I call it tough love, brother. There's plenty of times when you need to hold their feet to the fire. Again, you can do that because you've earned the right to. They know that you care. And so they're going to listen to you in that authoritative, big brother, big sister kind of way. Think about how often you hear about folks getting to the altar, in the marriage and running away because they got cold feet. Well, you're there. You're that wingman, wingwoman holding their best man at their wedding, kind of going, remember, you love her. Remember, she's your soulmate. Remember,
Uh-huh.
and that's how you treat that huge decision. I mean, we actually call it a marriage in
Yeah.
franchising. You're marrying that franchisor, and you've gone through the process. We've taken it from hundreds and hundreds down to dozens, down to handful, down to two, down to one. And this
Hmm.
is the one for you. So sometimes that's awkward, that's uncomfortable, but with the right consultant who's earned the relationship and earned the right to have that tough love conversation, it's magical.
And you mentioned a couple things that would benefit any sales process. You mentioned having the client set the timeline and the expectations, not just to throw them out there so that they would never be brought back up again, but so that you could hold them accountable as a partner, as a big brother, big sister, to help them reach a decision that's best for them. And I imagine sometimes it's probably very rare, but it turns out that, hey, they're just not right for any franchisor. They don't have the capital. It's not the right life stage for them. They got some family stuff going on, but still to be able to be in integrity and make sure you're walking them down that journey. So let's build a sales system around this, Red, because I think this is something that any salesperson would really benefit from, and making the next step as natural as possible. Just sliding right into home plate without having to ram somebody home and just say, now you need to make a decision. Now you need to buy from me. Yeah, coffee is for closers, but to your point, Glengarry Glen Ross, that sales process doesn't quite work as well as it might have when they were selling swampland in Florida back in the 1970s when that movie was made. So let's dig into this as a system. Now, when we talk about building systems for salespeople here at Bulletproof Selling, we trim hope away from their strategy. And I know you're a hope junkie, so we're not going to trim you away. We're just going to trim the hope away so they can have a better system. And the T in trim, trigger. At what point in the sales process should a salesperson be thinking about making the next step as natural as possible? Should it be before they ever get in front of a prospect? Should it be listening to the prospect, actively engaging and questioning, listening for a few things? Or should it be at the tail end of a conversation when it's just a natural time to wrap it up? When does the trigger event happen to really get into place the next natural step?
Interesting question. So the trigger event would be when you're confirming it towards the end of the conversation,
Okay.
but prior to every conversation, you already know what the next step is. In that
You have that
first
mapped out.
call, in the very first conversation, you have mapped it out. You have gotten their buy-in on it, their understanding. To our point earlier about visual and kinesthetic, you've shown them, ideally, you've shown them visually on the screen if you got a Zoom or maybe you emailed it to them, the steps you're going to go through with them, what you and you're going to do, what you're going to expect of them to do to get to the
Mhm.
place where you're going to introduce them to the franchisor. And then that Zor is going to do the same thing. If they have their act together with
Yeah.
proper systems, they're going to have a visual, again, either on the screen and or via email, perhaps on their, they've got like a server or a cloud that they share their attachments with the candidate. And one of them very early on is the steps in the process.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of this. I've done numerous talks on the discovery steps, learning about a
Yeah.
franchise. And I'll go online and I'll search franchise discovery processes and steps, and I get hundreds of visuals of what the process are, what the steps are. You start seeing some consistencies. Some people build a mountain of their steps. Some have
Mhm.
stair steps. Some have a track. Some have an
Yeah.
oval. It's fun to see the visual, but all of them start with that first call. They all have a few common steps in it. And then ultimately it's decision time. And those good salespeople, those good consultants, advisors are going to remind them where they're at in the process and confirm again of the next step in the process. And you know what we haven't even said is booking the next step. Let's get it
Mm.
booked on this step. Book the next call on the call every time.
Yep. Get it on the calendar. That's something I'm a firm believer in too. And something that we've seen, and I've mentioned it before on the show, Red, something that we have the ability to do now is send a calendar invite, even if the person hasn't confirmed a time with us for a variety of reasons. Maybe you weren't able to get to 3 p.m. on Tuesday during your call. But if I send a calendar invite, I've gone back and forth with folks to pin down a time via email when I could never actually get an appointment with them. And hopefully, of course, it's, can we get together at this particular time? Yep, send me the calendar invite. All right, let's rock and roll. But it is possible to do it a couple of other interesting ways too. Now, the
Your
trigger event.
assistant,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
did the same thing with your assistant. We went
Yeah.
back a couple times and said, wait a minute, I've got my live calendar online. Click on it, pick out whatever you want.
Yeah, make it happen.
Real
Yeah.
simple. Yeah.
That's perfect. And so with the trigger, you mentioned a couple of interesting things I want to make sure I iterate for all the salespeople listening. One, it's this process happens before the call in that you need to know what the next step is. If you don't have that mapped out, what is that next stage in the pipeline? What is that next prospect phase that you want to move that person into? Then you will be just shooting arrows in the dark, throwing stuff at the wall, hoping it sticks with booking that next step. Because if you can't tell your prospect what to expect at the end of this call and what to expect at the next step and the step after that, you're just playing jazz. You're actually relying on hope, but not in the way that that Red would advise you to. So we've got this thing actually triggered, which is great. Now I want to make it repeatable. I want to make sure that wherever my prospect is throughout my sales cycle, that I can actually use the same couple of steps to walk them through it. So let's get a little more tactical here. What are the things I need to know and do during a call to know, hey, this is the 4 or 5 or 6 step system to move a prospect from point A to point B to point C? What would you tell your salespeople to do as a repeatable process here?
Well, knowing what the steps are, and then you can't go to the next step until you've fulfilled this step.
Yeah.
There's no skipping steps.
Yeah.
Okay. You can go fast on those steps. Let's knock 3 of them out today, maybe, but
Yeah.
you can't go to step 3 without completing step 2. And so knowing what it takes to complete step 2, and a good salesperson, going back to the trusted advisor mindset, you're leading them through that in such a fluid and comfortable way, but with authority, with a strength. You remember the old adage, the velvet hammer.
Yeah.
You're as strong as a hammer, but soft as velvet, moving them through it naturally. Love that, just naturally. And so step by step by step, and have it and confirming it. There's no greasiness to this whatsoever. You're doing it with integrity. You're doing it with clarity from all parties. You're reconfirming audibly and visually each step. And it just done correctly with, like you said, the correct tactics and strategy, clarity from all parties. It can go a lot faster. I've seen consultants, on a rare occasion, there'll be a candidate, somebody interested in buying a franchise, that's actually working with 2 different consultants. Now, it can happen. Wow. And the one consultant goes twice as fast as the other and ultimately wins because they've taken a leadership approach, not been too afraid to put a cadence that makes sense. Now, a good consultant or salesperson will listen and pay attention. And if that cadence is too quick, if they're not getting confirmation, if they're not getting their homework done by the candidate, then they slow it down, reassess that cadence, reassess that timeline, and ultimately are going to get a balance between as reasonably quick as possible to get, because life is short and time kills deals, while at the same time being completely respectful of the candidate's timeline and capabilities.
That's amazing. So we got the trigger, we got making it repeatable. And I really, really appreciate this idea of knowing what you need to have completed in this step before you go to the next step. So few salespeople take the time to map that out, which means they're trying to accomplish eating the whale in one bite. And that's just a tough thing to do for anybody. And so if we've gotten a trigger, we've got making it repeatable through each step of the sales cycle. The I in trim is making this thing improvable. So you mentioned having 2 salespeople run the process and then seeing which one did better and asking why. That might be one way to improve it. How do you recommend your salespeople improve this system of easing your franchisees into the next step of the sales process?
So, I love the positive thinking. We don't call them franchisee until they buy a franchise, so they're still a candidate. But we're thinking right, thinking at the begin with the end in mind. They're already a franchisee in my mind, brother. So, how are you moving them through and improving the steps? Well, each success you have should build upon that other another success and another success. So, as you've awarded. See, franchisors, we don't call it selling franchise. We call it awarding, because it's a mutual awarding, a mutual interview process, sort of like dating. You got to like her and she's got to like you. Just me liking her doesn't always work. I found that out back in the day. And so when you do succeed in matching that great right candidate with that right franchisor and they ultimately buy, then you get a testimonial, which helps you improve the next candidate and improve the likelihood they're going to work with you because of the testimonials you've acquired, both from the franchisor and the candidates. You put them on all the social media, you put them on your website, you put them in your email campaigns, etc. So that does help you improve it. And then each time you have interaction, you as that consultant salesperson have interaction with the franchisors out there, you're improving your process and understanding the franchisor's model, and more importantly, understanding the franchisor's representative, because that representative of that opportunity is so critical to the success of this process with your candidates. And if they don't know what they're doing, if they don't have the steps in place clearly communicated, they're not getting another lead from you. You're
Mhm.
moving on to their competitor who probably has a better process and better system than they do. So improvement comes in a lot of ways, but success and experience will lend to that improvement drastically.
And testimonials absolutely critical in this. And I bet you that if you were a really savvy salesperson and you were thinking about systems, you'd begin tracking the successes that you had by what that person was doing before they decided to become a franchisee. And that maybe they just retired from an executive position. Maybe they had run their own business at some point in the past. Maybe they'd never run a business. And that way you could start building a whole catalog of these things that you could have on hand, arrows in your quiver. So whatever type of prospect you ran into next, whatever type of candidate, you would have that ready to go. Oh, you say you're this and you're this and you're this. I was
Yep.
just talking with somebody like you last week. We were able to set them up successfully with a franchisor. Here's their words, or here's their video of them having a little bit of time to talk with you about that great experience. So it's an amazing way to make it improvable. The final
Sean,
piece of
I'll
this
tell you what,
acronym trim. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
on that topic, you nailed it so well. Understanding your ideal candidate, right?
Yeah.
Hunt, where you go, fish where the fish are.
Yep.
And from the consultant side, there's some consultants that really look for a certain type of candidate, but even more so on the franchisor side. When
Mhm.
you know your ideal candidate, I get a good buddy who said, he's a franchisor, he's the rep for the franchisor. He said, Red, we only look for one type of candidate. One and one only. I've never said, I'm like, you're going to turn people away? Yeah, probably so. We
Yeah.
want pharmaceutical reps,
Mm.
pharmaceutical sales rep. Are you kidding me? Wow. That is friggin' narrow. He
Yeah.
said, the first one or two I had bought real quick. They loved us. They built the brand well. They followed systems. They weren't afraid to get out there and shake the bushes. He said they're just ideal. And so he
Mhm.
started creating his whole marketing plan to attract those candidates and to communicate with my consultants around it. With one word, anyone that you find that was a pharmaceutical rep, I guess that's two words, you
Yep.
send them to me. We're making money and changing lives. And man,
Love
that
it.
works so well. So his process was that's my candidate. You give everybody else to someone else. I don't want them, but you got a pharmaceutical rep, and that's stuck in their mind. That was not just
Mhm.
sales, but the marketing that filled his sales funnel was so targeted, and it worked.
And we could do a whole show on finding that ideal target customer profile, just like you mentioned. That's a whole nother episode we'll have to get together and do. But the final M in trim is measure. So we've got the trigger event in this. We've made it repeatable to guide that prospect or that candidate to the next step of the sales cycle to make it feel natural and have them really be the ones that set the timeline on when that happens. So you can always hold them accountable to their own words. We know how to make it improvable. And how do I know that this thing is working? Am I measuring conversion from one stage of the sale to the other? Am I measuring final conversion as the ultimate, kind of indicator of success here? How do I measure this to make sure this system is actually getting me the results I'm after?
Back when I was a franchisor many moons ago, I founded a franchise organization. One of our mantras was you measure and monitor what matters.
Hmm.
So you nailed it with the M, measure. Um, your all leads are not created equal. And so from a consultant or a franchisor standpoint, measuring not just how many leads you get, it blows my mind how often I'll hear a franchisor go, "Wow, boy, we got 200 leads from them last month." Really? Because you closed none. You
Yeah.
know, that to me is a torturous life of
Hmm.
following up 18 times with text calls and emails, and you finally get hold of someone that doesn't speak English, has no money, and think they applied for a job.
Right.
Um, while with other sources, perhaps consultants, you're
Hmm.
awarding, 1 out of 8, 1 out of 12, and life is good. You're enjoying the process. You're connecting with really good candidates who are going to buy a franchise from someone.
Hmm.
And so it's not just how many leads, but so measuring the closings and measuring how far they get with each step of the process. Now, if you've got a sales team, as you do, and I do, although I don't have visibility down deep like you, perhaps because of the freedom we give our consultants. you can see one's getting 50% of them to the third call, and one is getting 5% of them at the third call. What are we doing wrong? So you measure what matters, and you can address it. But if you're not measuring it, you don't even know where the problems are.
Yeah, all I know is, are you selling or are you not? So that's a beautiful system, Red. We got the trigger, repeatable, improvable, and measurable for naturally guiding it to the next step.
I'll tell you what, measuring, I'll throw one more measure out there that's so critical. I've worked with and in sales organizations where somebody's closing a bunch of deals. They're a top performer. Oh my gosh. Wow. High five to them. I want to be like them. But bro, if you get down and measure the steps, wow, suddenly they're possibly your worst or one of your worst, quote unquote, salespeople, because they're burning the ups, as they say on the lot. They are taking 4 times the leads of anybody else. Those leads that you're putting, the Glengarry leads there, you're putting the big money towards. And all you see is how many they're closing, not how many they're burning. And so measuring that is a super critical component from a sales manager or a owner standpoint, is understanding all the way through the funnel, not just the last step.
Yeah, that's great. Now, you'd mentioned, Red, that you're looking for a very specific type of person at your company. So for all the listeners out there, hopefully you got something great that you could apply to your sales process. But Red is one of those sales leaders that needs good people. So Red, tell us a little bit about what you got going on there and the type of candidate that you're looking for to join your consultant team and how people can get in touch with you.
Oh, you're awesome, Sean. Thank you. Well, IFPG.org is simple. IFPG.org is our website. You can learn a lot there. We're looking for someone, you've heard a lot about what we do on this today, someone who has the ability to manage themselves. That's the good and the bad. It's up to you. You manage yourself. We provide you every tool, every bit of training, support imaginable. I have some folks that are very successful doing 3 deals a year. They're happy. They're working 12 hours a week, never been happier. Maybe they're 75, maybe they're a soccer mom, but they're loving that. I got other guys that are doing a deal a week and making a couple million. So I'm not worried about how many deals they do. I want them to meet them where they're at and provide them what they're looking for with that kind of work-life integration, the fulfilling life, knowing you're making a difference. We call ourselves life changers. That's our hashtag life changer. So an individual who is not afraid to do what we just said, have those calls, maybe have those tough love conversations, but really enjoys helping people make a life decision and transition from perhaps the rat race or the slavery of a job to the freedom of being a life changer within franchising and entrepreneurship. That's who I love to have conversations with. It is an investment. We're not hiring. We're not a franchise. We are a membership organization that trains consultants and then helps franchisors to succeed with those consultants. So it is $19,900. We don't hide it, but you get the full training certification. You even get a bunch of leads, website, CRM, very, very low investment for the potential of one deal and you're in the black real quickly. So happy to talk to you. You can find out a whole bunch more at ifpg.org, Sean. What do you think, Sean? I think you'd be a great franchise consultant.
Well, Red, I was thinking as you're going through all of this, you've set up a franchise for salespeople, right? For a low investment price, they can buy into all the systems that you've already built to generate success.
Exactly right. We have everything they need, the leads, the websites, everything. We're not technically a franchise. We're a training organization and a membership organization, but we serve in a similar way where we give them every bit of support they'd ever need. Yes.
That's amazing, Red. Well, I'll make sure in the show notes to get everybody the links up to your stuff so they can find out more about that opportunity. And of course, just to connect with you. You are incredibly active on LinkedIn. If you want to know about somebody that's really applying systems to the way that they sell and the way their organization sells, you want to follow Red Boswell. Now, for us here at Bulletproof Selling, make sure you're following us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube for these live streams. And of course, the podcast that we produce out of this, it's on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found. And of course, for more sales systems each and every day to help you replace hope with certainty, check out the resources that are going up each and every week at bulletproof-selling.com. Sean Rhodes here. It's been a pleasure serving the sales community alongside you, Red. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.
Let's do it.